I was sipping my coffee, staring out at the skyline from my apartment on the 32nd floor, when my phone buzzed. The notification made my heart skip, not from excitement, but from that familiar, twisting knot of anticipation and dread. It was a message from Claire. My sister. Can we talk? It's urgent. I set my mug down, feeling the warm ceramic burn against my fingers, and let out a small, ironic laugh. Urgent. Like it ever had been when she stole what wasn't hers. First my prom date, then my first boyfriend, and now again. I straightened my silk blouse, smoothing the wrinkles I didn't really mind, and looked at my reflection in the window. The woman staring back was calm, composed, undeniably successful. No one would ever guess the nights I spent crying over betrayal, the quiet fury I had tucked away under tailored jackets and designer heels. My mind raced, memories colliding with the present. 5 years ago, I never imagined I'd be here, in this apartment, with my own company thriving while my sister's chaotic life barely scraped by. And yet, here I was, facing the same toxic energy I thought I'd left behind. I took a deep breath, the scent of roasted coffee beans mingling with a faint hint of rain drifting in through the open window, and tapped my reply.
Sure.
Where? Simple words, but they carried a weight I wasn't sure she was ready for, and a truth she would soon realize. The girl she once underestimated had grown into a force she could no longer control. I remember that night like it was yesterday, though it's been years. I was 22, heart wide open, trusting the wrong people. My apartment smelled faintly of lavender, a candle burning on the coffee table as I waited for David, the one I thought was mine. And then Claire walked in. My sister, smiling that way she always did when she knew she had the upper hand. You left your phone at home, she said, tossing it onto the couch with a casual air. David wanted to see you, but I told him I'd meet him instead. I froze, the lump in my throat growing heavier by the second. My hands shook, gripping the edge of the table. Betrayal isn't just a word when it's someone you love and someone who shares your blood. It's a physical ache, a fire that starts at your chest and spreads to your stomach, leaving you hollow. You what? I whispered, voice barely audible. Claire shrugged, leaning back, completely at ease. He likes me better. You should move on. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I blinked them away. I couldn't give her the satisfaction. Not then, not ever. That night, I walked to the park across the street, the chilly wind biting at my cheeks. I held tight to the small locket my grandmother had given me, the one with her advice etched inside. Never let someone else's choices define your worth. Build your own path, and they'll follow the trail you leave behind. I sat on the cold bench until my fingers went numb, letting the grief wash over me. But somewhere between the sting of loss and the cool breeze, a determination began to burn. I wouldn't be defined by Claire's manipulations or David's indecision. I wouldn't wait for life to hand me what I deserved. I would take it, piece by piece, with my own hands. By the time I returned to my apartment, I'd made a decision. I would leave behind the girl who cried in the shadows and become someone who could never be underestimated again. Someone my sister couldn't steal from, no matter how hard she tried. After that night, everything changed. I took the locket my grandmother had given me and held onto it like a compass, a constant reminder that I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. I threw myself into work, taking odd jobs, freelance projects, anything that let me stretch my skills and prove to myself that I could create my own life. Some nights, exhaustion wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, and I cried quietly alone, on the floor of my tiny studio apartment. But even in those moments, I reminded myself that I was planting seeds that would grow far beyond Claire's reach. It wasn't easy. I learned to navigate a world that often dismissed women like me. My first mentor, a brilliant woman named Vanessa, took me under her wing after seeing a small project I'd poured my heart into. She had that rare ability to see potential where others only saw flaws. "You're stronger than you think," she told me one night, reviewing my work over mugs of bitter coffee. "And smarter. Use both." Her encouragement became a lifeline. With her guidance, I honed my skills, built confidence, and started taking on bigger projects. The nights were long. Some were spent drafting emails I erased a dozen times before hitting send. Others were spent teaching myself software or marketing strategies from online courses and borrowed textbooks. I faced rejection constantly, clients who didn't return calls, colleagues who doubted me, the occasional sting of my own self-doubt. But each small success lit a spark. My first big client, a local startup, trusted me with their brand. The first profitable contract I signed felt like a victory against every silent voice that had ever told me I wouldn't make it. I kept most of my progress secret. My family thought I was scraping by, posting carefully curated, modest updates on social media that hinted at small victories, while concealing the full picture. Claire's smug comments and pitying texts only fueled me further. Every day, I built a life she would never expect, a life she couldn't touch. And slowly, over the years, the pieces came together. I founded my own boutique marketing firm, securing clients I'd once only dreamed of. I traveled to cities I'd only seen in magazines, made connections with people who genuinely believed in me, and watched as my bank account reflected a freedom I had only imagined. The best part? I did it all without anyone's help, certainly not Claire's, certainly not David's. I was building something unassailable, something beyond the reach of jealousy, betrayal, or family drama. I was becoming the woman my younger self had longed to be. Independent, fearless, and quietly unstoppable. Yet, despite all the success, a small part of me couldn't stop thinking about Claire. I wondered if she even realized the storm she had set in motion when she stole from me, not just my boyfriends, but my confidence, my time, my energy. I smiled faintly, knowing that one day, she would see exactly what she had underestimated. The day Claire and David showed up at my office, I already knew how it would go. They thought they were walking into the same struggling, anxious version of me they'd seen years ago. What they didn't know was that nothing about me had stayed small. I had arranged the meeting in my downtown office, a sleek, sunlit space filled with large abstract paintings, polished oak floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The smell of fresh flowers mingled with a faint trace of espresso from my morning routine. It was understated elegance, the kind that whispered success without shouting it. When they walked in, Claire's eyes flicked around the room, scanning the furniture, the artwork, the small details I had collected over the years, the subtle display of awards, the neatly stacked portfolios of my clients. I leaned against my desk, arms crossed, letting them absorb the space. Silence stretched, thick and expectant, as they struggled to reconcile the woman before them with the image of the girl they had once toyed with. David was the first to break it. "Wow, this is impressive," he said, his voice tinged with guilt and awe. Claire said nothing, her usual smugness faltering, replaced by uncertainty. I gestured toward the window. The city sprawled out beneath us. "This is the result of 5 years of hard work," I said, keeping my tone calm, conversational, yet impossible to ignore. "I built this company from the ground up. Every client, every contract, every late night, it's mine. All mine." Claire's jaw tightened, and I could see the flicker of realization in her eyes. She had thought I'd crumble after she stole David, after she humiliated me, after she convinced herself that I'd never recover. But here I was, stronger, more confident, unshakable. I picked up a portfolio from my desk and opened it, flipping to pages filled with contracts, letters of endorsement, and financial statements. "This," I said, tapping a highlighted section with my polished fingernail, "is my net worth, my assets, my company ownership. I did this without anyone helping me, especially without you." Claire finally spoke, her voice faltering. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize because you never looked past yourself," I interrupted, soft but firm. "You've spent your life taking from others, believing the world owed you what you didn't earn. But success isn't about taking. It's about building, even when the odds are against you." David swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. I'm sorry," he muttered. I let their words hang in the air. For years, they had underestimated me. For years, they had believed my worth was defined by them. And now, They were confronted with the truth. I had taken everything they thought they controlled and turned it into my own power. Finally, I leaned back in my chair, letting a small, victorious smile play on my lips. "This is who I am now," I said. "Not the girl who lets life happen to her. Not the one you thought you could manipulate. The woman in front of you? She's unstoppable." Claire's face went pale, her hands twisting together nervously. I watched as the shock, guilt, and amazement mingled across both of their faces. They had walked in expecting the same old dynamics. Instead, they were confronted with a woman they could no longer control, a life they could no longer touch, and a power they had never imagined I would claim. I could feel the shift the moment I spoke my truth. The room was no longer just my office, it had become a stage for a reckoning, and I was finally the one holding the script. Claire and David had stepped in expecting to see a familiar version of me, timid, unsure, someone they could manipulate or dismiss. Instead, they were staring at a woman who had built her life on determination, resilience, and vision, a woman who now had the power to decide if, and how, they fit into it. I took a slow breath, letting the tension settle, and leaned forward, hands resting lightly on the polished desk. "I'm willing to let you both be a part of my life again," I said carefully. "But on my terms." Claire's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and disbelief flitting across her face. "Terms," she repeated, almost as if the word were foreign. "Yes," I said. "You've spent years taking what wasn't yours. I won't enable that anymore. If you want to have a relationship with me, whether it's as a sister or a friend, there are conditions." I listed them deliberately, each one a blend of justice and compassion. "Claire, you need to take responsibility for your actions. Stop sabotaging those around you, and start pursuing something that's truly yours. Build, don't steal. David, you need to reflect on the choices you make and how they affect others. Apologize where necessary and respect boundaries. And both of you, you have to stop underestimating me. Ever." They both shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't flinch. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment when the tables turned and I claimed the upper hand. "These aren't punishments," I continued, voice steady, calm but uncompromising. "They're opportunities for growth, for self-respect, and for earning a place in a life you once dismissed." Claire's shoulders sagged slightly, but I could see her processing, thinking. She had always thrived on chaos and manipulation, but now she was faced with clarity. And David, for all his awkwardness and guilt, nodded slowly. I could sense that even he realized the depth of the lessons they needed to internalize. I leaned back in my chair, letting a small, satisfied smile play across my lips. This was more than revenge. This wasn't about anger or punishment. It was about reclaiming my life, establishing boundaries, and making sure the people who had caused pain understood the consequences and the path forward. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of my power and freedom. I had built a life untouchable by betrayal. And now, I was offering a chance for healing, but only if they were willing to rise to it. It was a shift not just in control, but in perspective. They would have to meet me on my level or not at all. And in that moment, watching their reactions, a mixture of hesitation, awe, and reluctant respect, I knew they understood one simple truth. I was no longer the girl they could manipulate. I was the woman in control, and I would never allow anyone to take that from me again. Months passed after that confrontation, and change began in ways I hadn't dared to hope for. Claire started her own small business, something she had always claimed she wanted but never pursued because it wasn't easy. She called me occasionally, asking for advice, no longer to manipulate, but to learn. And David? He found his footing too, finally acknowledging how his choices had hurt others and striving to be more considerate in every relationship he entered. Watching them grow, I realized the power I had wielded wasn't in revenge or punishment. It was in setting boundaries, in demanding respect, and in giving them a chance to rise on their own merit. And while I had once sought validation from others, I now understood it came only from within. The girl who had cried in the shadows, clutching my grandmother's locket, had grown into a woman who thrived in the light. Sometimes I held that locket in my hand, turning it over between my fingers. It had been my talisman, my reminder that worth isn't given, it's claimed. I had claimed mine, and in doing so, I had shaped not only my destiny, but had subtly nudged theirs toward accountability and growth. I took a deep breath one evening, looking out over the city from my balcony, and smiled. There was a serenity in knowing that the past no longer dictated the present. The betrayals, the stolen relationships, the sleepless nights, they were part of my story, but they no longer held power over me. My phone buzzed again, a notification from Claire. I read it, smiled, and set it down. She was trying, really trying, and that was enough. Not because I owed her forgiveness, but because I had chosen peace over bitterness. I sipped my coffee, the rich aroma grounding me, and glanced at the skyline as dusk painted the buildings gold. I had rebuilt my life on my terms, with integrity, courage, and resilience. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, soft yet unwavering, I am unstoppable, I am enough, and I will never let anyone steal my light again. It was the truth I had fought for, the lesson I had learned, and the voice I carried forward. A voice of strength, grace, and absolute independence.